where we see
We could ask that everyone please try to take a seat. And anyone who's half in the place, please come into the room if you're joining us. Well, why is that?
Because the only one will interpret from French to English, and the other one will
Okay, fine.
So this means it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, we know.
He wants to make sure that he gets his 5 minutes.
Okay.
But the 5 minutes will probably
It's really
so
10
just, you
minutes.
know.
Everyone else is talking already. The other guy needs a few translators.
10 minutes.
You got. Okay. Yeah, you don't have to worry. Everything.
In any case, also 10 minutes is short for such a.
Well, then we're going to come back. I want to come back. Be able to come back and get some specific.
Provoke us.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah. Okay. Can we ask everyone to please take their seats, and we'd like to get started soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to get started. If everyone could take a seat. We're missing a panelist. As soon as we have our full panel here. Esteemed colleagues and honored guests. No, no good? How about now? Not really? Mic working well? People here or not? Sounds good. Okay. All the other mics are on, okay. They're all off? Okay. Esteemed colleagues and honored guests, I am honored to open this evening's program in which a distinguished panel of religious leaders will discuss aspects of our theme, which we constantly stress. Not simply the study of anti-Semitism, but also the development of a set of concrete proposals by what we might describe in the language of American basketball as a full court press, that is a multifaceted attack on this still rising scourge. Don't think I ever watch a basketball game on TV, but I know the term. Before proceeding to our panel, I want to take a few moments to offer a welcome to all of our participants on behalf of the co-organizers of the conference, University of Vienna, Tel Aviv University, New York University, and the European Jewish Congress. I want to again express our thanks to Dr. Moshe Kantor, who is the principal sponsor of our conference. I'm particularly gratified that my university, NYU, specifically its Global Network for Advanced Research in Jewish Studies, which I am honored to direct, and the Squirrel Ball Department of Hebrew and Judaic Studies were able to participate in the organization of this program. Our university's deep commitment to Jewish studies and to the Jewish community as a whole, as well as to the state of Israel as evidenced by NYU's Tel Aviv program, our global site in Israel, makes it only natural for us to be involved as an academic leader in the fight against anti-Semitism. Now, the way our program is going to work is as follows. We are going to hear from our panelists overall general introductory statements. After these, we will take a short break to hear a musical interlude from Cantor Shmuel Barzilai, chief cantor of the Vienna Jewish community. We will then have additional questions and discussion with our panelists. We will then ask Cantor Barzilai for a second musical interlude, and we will then go on to open up to questions from the floor. We would like to conclude by the announced time of 8:30, and hopefully this will work. The panelists have been given a series of questions that we hope will get addressed either in their opening statements or other remarks, or which I will ask them in particular to make sure that we get to some of these issues, and hopefully we'll be able to speak about serious matters. Now, let me begin by introducing all of our panelists so that it will be possible to discuss our subject in an organized manner without too much interruption. So first, it's my honor to introduce Michael BÜNKER. He is an Austrian Protestant Lutheran theologian, was appointed bishop of the Evangelical Church of the Augsburg Confession in Austria in January of 2008. He has been an honorary professor of the Faculty of Protestant Theology at Vienna University since 2003, and fulfills the function of General Secretary for the Community of Protestant Churches in Europe. Hassen CHALGHOUMI is a French imam who heads the Drancy Mosque in Saint-Saint-Denis and is the president of the Conférence des Imams de France. He studied in Tunis, Syria, and Pakistan, and came to France in 1996. He promotes interreligious dialogue and organizes an exchange program between French and Israeli imams. He strongly opposed the terror attacks in Toulouse and Paris and worked closely with Jewish organizations and leaders. He, by the way, will be speaking through an interpreter in French. Pier Battista PIZZABALLA is the titular Archbishop of Verbe and the Apostolic Administrator of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem. He was ordained as a priest in 1990 and studied classical studies in Ferrara and theology in Rome and Jerusalem, where he was a professor as well. Between 2004 and 2016, he served as custodian of the Holy Land for the Franciscan Order in Jerusalem. Furthermore, he holds the position of Pro-Grand Prior in the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. Abraham SKORKA is an Argentinian rabbi, biophysicist, and author. He is head of the Seminario Rabiníco Latinoamericano and professor of biblical and rabbinic literature, as well as honorary professor of Hebrew law at the Universidad del Salvador. In cooperation with Archbishop Jorge Mario Bergoglio, later Pope Francis, he authored the book, which is a series of interreligious talks on significant subjects. Now, with this, let me say a few words about our topic and then open up to the discussion. There can be little question that much of the hatred of Jews that has been a part of our history for over 2 millennia is rooted in religious beliefs and prejudices. Further, it is clear that Jewish religious beliefs and self-consciousness involve constant reaction to anti-Semitism and its horrible results. Clearly, no serious attempt to combat this affliction can be conceived without attention to the religious aspect. Indeed, it has been from the religious community, beginning especially with Vatican II, that many of the attempts to fight anti-Semitism have come. To put it another way, it would seem that religion might aptly be described as a great part of the problem and a great part of the potential solution. I see our program tonight as touching for the most part on these two themes. In what ways are religious ideas, teachings, and communities in part responsible for anti-Jewish prejudices, even hatred? And in what ways have they and can they be even more active in efforts to defeat the enemy, this enemy of our civilization? To this end, we've invited this distinguished group to speak. So we will now turn to asking our distinguished panelists in the official order to give us their opening comments, and then, as I said, we'll have the interlude with Cantor Barzilai, and then return to discussion with our panel. So we call first on Bishop Michael BÜNKER.
Thank you very much, moderator, for the introduction, and especially for inviting me to participate in this discussion today. It's a special honor for me, but also a special challenge. As already said, I represent the perspective of the Protestant Church, foremost of the Protestant Church here in Austria, but also with some perspectives with regard to Europe. The Protestant churches, Lutheran and Reformed alike, have something in common with other Christian churches, Orthodox or Catholic, Roman Catholic. These are the 1,500 years of Christian anti-Judaism that has its roots in antiquity, maybe in the New Testament, yes, in the New Testament, and especially in the Middle Ages. Initially, humanism and Reformation were favorably inclined towards the Jews, mainly because of a newfound interest in the Hebrew language and the context of Old Testament science. But Martin Luther's, especially Martin Luther's late anti-Judaic writings are a stain on the history of Protestantism, and his recommendations to destroy the synagogues, to burn the books, and to deny Jews any social and religious recognition have been taken up, as we all know, and horribly realized in the days of the Nazi regime. We only did what Luther recommended, said Julius Streicher after the war. And the Austrian Protestant Church, I have to say it honest, was too marked by German nationalism and anti-Semitism in the first half of the 20th century. After the year 1945, the awareness of a Christian responsibility and guilt for the Shoah increased. I mention only the Council Declaration of the Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate. And in Protestantism, each church has to find its own way of repentance. Some churches led the way, others followed, however, in some cases with a marked delay. So only in 1998 has the Protestant Church in Austria found clear words admitting its guilt and co-responsibility, and also defining its new relationship to Judaism in its declaration Time for Conversion. This understanding of the moral complicity of the churches in the Shoah has, as I see, three important consequences. The first is the roots of Christian anti-Judaism and the resulting anti-Semitism had to be explored. Our own teachings and practice, our liturgy, our sermons and instructions had to be reviewed for anti-Semitic content. This task is ongoing, and this ranges from a frequently wrong interpretation or even translation of biblical traditions and a distorted image of Judaism to the doctrine of the meaning of Jesus of Nazareth. The Protestant churches in Europe gave a common statement in 2001, and in this statement they declare, based on the awareness of a Christian co-responsibility and guilt for the Shoah, it recognizes the valid choice of the Jews as God's people and the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, and this also implies for the Protestant churches a rejection of any form of mission to the Jews. A second implication is the understanding of a link to the church to Judaism. To promote the dialogue between Christians and Jews is a special concern for Protestant churches. Although we see and acknowledge the permanent differences in our teachings, we can regard us mutually as brothers and sisters and are called to strive for a good and trusting coexistence, work together for religious freedom and the human rights in general, and promote a social way of living together in peace and justice. The mandate to give food to the hungry, to clothe the naked, to give justice to widows and orphans, and to provide shelter for the persecuted and the oppressed, summed up the commandment to love our neighbor. This we read in the Torah, and this we read in the Gospel. This connects us. The third consequence I have mentioned is the realization that anti-Semitism and any form of anti-Judaism is irreconcilable with the Christian faith. Anti-Semitism is the rejection of Jesus the Jew. Anti-Semitism is, as we all know, on the rise in a lot of European countries. In Germany last year, about 4 anti-Semitic offenses were registered per day, of which over 90% had a right-wing background. And in Austria, we heard last week about 503 anti-Semitic offenses last year. Nobody knows the number of unreported offenses. What may the reasons be? First, it seems to become more and more normal to express hate, racism, and also anti-Semitism, not only, but especially in the social media. Second, there is, especially in Austria, a huge, horrible heritage of anti-Semitic prejudices. The arsenal is well equipped, which now comes to the surface again. We can think about the reasons why. Third, I think that we face an increasing polarization in the societies and a deep uncertainty concerning the future. And Jews, as the born scapegoats, as born authors of so-called conspiracy theories, can be blamed to be the reason that things go wrong. To fight anti-Semitism always includes to show solidarity for Jews here and now, today. Most recently, this became necessary in the context of an Austrian politician of the FPÖ party who was leading member of a fraternity whose songbook features horrible anti-Semitic texts. One can critically ask, and this I want to do at the end of my statement, whether the statements of church leadership and commissions, the activities of those involved in Christian-Jewish dialogue, the open approach of dealing with our history and countless other initiatives really do reach the congregations and their fields of work, such as religious education. Not to mention the numerous church members who do not actively participate in church life or church communication in any form. The report of the Independent Expert Committee on Antisemitism of the German Bundestag, you may know this report, of April last year, has stated, based on empirical evidence, that the membership in a Christian church has no visible impact on the question whether somebody is prejudiced against Jews or not. There is no significant difference between the average population and the members of Christian churches in Germany, and I'm quite sure in Austria it's the same. This sobering result shows us that there is still a lot to do for the churches, also for the Protestant ones, and also here in Austria. This is another reason why I would like to thank the hosts and organizers of this conference. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Archbishop Battista PIZZABALLA.
Thank you. It's very difficult to summarize in 10 minutes the history of relations between Catholic Church and Jewish people. So I have to choose some points, and every choice, of course, is partial. I think very short and to the point. I think everyone knows that the history of the relations between Catholic Church and Jewish people has been very problematic since the Church Father till 50, 60 years ago. The relations were very difficult and terrible. The religious teaching was that the Jewish people killed God, killers of God, Jesus. The church is new Israel. It means that the old Israel is replaced, and so on and so on. And the church was the main body, at least in Europe, that influential body in the mentality, in the culture and had a very important role in creating the mentality of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, very shortly. The turning point was in 65 during the Council of Vatican II. 28th of October, we had a document, Nostra Aetate, that changed completely the attitude. I mean, this started before 65, but in 65 was a turning point, changed completely the attitude of the Catholic Church towards the Jewish people. First of all, was said very clearly, openly, that the Jewish people didn't kill any god, and that there is a continuity from the Jewish people of the time of Jesus and the Jewish people today. They are the same. There is a continuity that we as Christians are rooted, the Christian church is rooted in the Judaism. And also in our context, there was very clearly said that the church and the Jewish people, they have to work together in order to combat any form of anti-Semitism and so on and so on. Since then, very shortly, a long journey started in the relations between the Jewish people and the Catholic Church in two ways, documents and gestures. Documents, since then there are many documents that interpret and help the Catholic believers to interpret the spirit of Nostra Aetate, how to teach, for instance, in the seminaries, the homilies, the interpretation of the Holy Scriptures, and the document about the Shoah, we remember, that was discussed, but anyway, it was a very important document, and many others. And also, I think more important also, the gestures. The visit of the Pope in the Synagogue of Rome, the visit John Paul II in the Holy Land in Israel, Yad Vashem, the Kotel, and the speeches, and the visit also the concentration camp, and so on. These gestures were very important because created much more than the documents, because I don't know how many Catholics read the document. Very important to create this mentality of approach and a different approach towards the Jewish people. Of course, not everything is accomplished. This is endless, it is an ongoing journey for all of us. And we have still to work in the seminaries and in the theology centers, in our schools, and Catholic schools, and so on. Today, there is a big difference when you talk about anti-Semitism in the United States, Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia, and so on. So I have to distinguish. There's a lot of differences. Of course, in Europe, where, especially after the Shoah, there is a sensitiveness that is very difficult to find in Africa or in Asia, and so on. But it's important to put this question of anti-Semitism in the context. These churches, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and so on, they are contesting in the church, in our context, the Eurocentric approach in our theology. They said, why should we, as Asian, as Africans or Latin Americans, study the European theology? We have to develop our own theology. Our own, the Christian faith should be inculturated, incarnated in our different contexts. So, and anti-Semitism enters also in this discussion. Anti-Semitism is something European, doesn't affect us as it affects the Europeans. Why should we learn such an argument and so on? It's very far from us. We don't have Jews, for instance, in Africa and so on. Why should we learn this? This is very complicated and very interesting also topic. The question is, if in Asia and Africa and so on, it's possible to learn Christian theology without referring at all to the European theology. And of course, we have, this is a question. And of course, the Jewish root cannot be put in discussion. The Jesus that in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America they believe, who is the incarnated Jewish Jesus that was born in Bethlehem and died in Jerusalem. So this cannot be put in discussion. So anyway, we have to understand this discussion in this context. And of course, in Middle East, where I'm coming from, where already 30 years I'm living, this is still the Nostra Aetate, the journey that the church did in Nostra Aetate in Middle East is still its beginning. We have to say this. For two reasons. The 90% of the Christians in Middle East are Arabs, and the political situation is affecting terribly the approach to all what is concerning anti-Semitism, and also the Islamic culture, Islamic context where we're living in is influential, very strongly influential in creating this mentality. The modern anti-Semitism is not that, another point, the modern anti-Semitism is not directly connected to the church. In a way, yes, but not directly. This is my opinion. Maybe you disagree. I would like to hear your opinion because I'm thinking about the church now is is not the main body that create mentality, create opinion in everywhere in the world. We are one element, but not the main one. I'm wondering, as Catholic bishop, how many Catholics are following our teaching in ethical issues. The same also in all the other issues. So it is important to think, my impression, maybe I'm wrong, the attendance to the churches now in Europe is 10%, maybe less. In the Middle East, a little more, not that much, and so on. So the modern form of anti-Semitism, they're using the old prejudices, sometimes using the church, but not directly connected with the church and the church teaching. But doesn't mean that we don't have our responsibilities. We have to stop working. We have to work, of course, but not alone. We cannot do it alone. And now we have to work, I think, in two levels, two contexts as church. I'm going to write the conclusion. First of all, internally, we have to keep working internally because the journey from Nostra Aetate is not finished. We have to work in our seminaries, theological center, in our schools, in manuals. There is still a lot of work to do. You cannot change 2,000 years in 50 years. It takes time to overcome. Sometimes we have prejudices that we are not aware of. This was my personal experience. I didn't know that I have anti-Semitic Judaism till I arrived to Israel. When I started to, I understood, I didn't think about that this could be a prejudice. So we have to work about this. The other level is ad extra, external. We have to work, first of all, with the other religions, with other religious, Jews and Islamic, of course, Muslim, for this is very important, because we alone cannot create opinion, but the interreligious dialogue now that is still at very rhetoric level, we are all the monotheistic faith, we believe in the same God, blah, 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 but we have to go some step forward and to put some more content in our serious content in our discussion, and anti-Semitism is one of them, in order to create public opinion more than what we can do now. So anti-Semitism, and I conclude, has to do with the attitude, religious attitude toward the other. In all the religions, there is a teaching how to behave towards the other. And anti-Semitism is this. Combat the anti-Semitism means that we, in our own faith and our own churches, but also in interreligious dialogue, we have to purifying and clarifying our religious attitude towards the other from all the traditional prejudices. In all the societies, there is always the bad one, the traitor, the Judah situation, the Judah figure. So we have to combat this, and to combat this is not just because of the society from a social point of view, but it's something internal. We have to purify always our interpretation of the scripture, our theology, in order to understand what is coming from the source of our faith and what is coming from the tradition and prejudices and so on. So it is not just a social need, it's an internal need that comes from our own belief that continuously, it is endless, has to be purified from the human contamination in order to be always a light and example for all. Of course, there are many other things to do, but these are very shortly the main points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear, with the help of an interpreter, from Imam Hassen CHALGHOUMI.
Bonsoir. Je pense qu'il y a 4 points, il y a 4 terrains qu'on peut travailler, qu'on peut trouver des solutions et aussi des réflexions. La première, c'est le discours religieux. Deuxième, éducation. Troisième, Internet, réseaux sociaux. Et la quatrième, politique et société civile. Première chose, que le discours religieux. Malheureusement, c'est triste. En Europe, en général, il n'y a pas la religion spirituelle. Il y a une religion politique. Elle règne plus que la religion entre la relation de l'individu et son créateur. Plus qu'on appelle la mouvance frères musulmans, Ikhwan. C'est elle qui tient énormément le terrain, quel que soit en France. Je vous donne des exemples. Vous savez, certains fidèles ou enfants, ce sont des victimes de qui? Ce sont des victimes de ce discours. Quand vous trouvez un imam à la fin de la prêche, il lève sa main pour prier contre les juifs et les chrétiens. Allahumma alayka bil yahudi wa nasara. En arabe, et Dieu, occupe-toi des juifs et des chrétiens. Ce discours qui fait autant de dégâts, je pense que c'est un travail énorme à faire. Tant qu'on n'a pas dissocié, tant qu'on n'a pas fait le nécessaire, je parle au sein de la communauté musulmane, de enlever, de combattre l'islam politique, de combattre la mouvance qui nourrit ce discours. Par exemple, je vous donne l'exemple. Les mouvances, on a en France et en Europe, l'UEF, l'Union Organisation Islamique de France, on a CBSB, on a Collectif Cheikh Yassine, on a CCF, on a l'AMF, Association musulmane de France. Tous, ce sont des mouvances. C'est pas ils cherchent à avoir un besoin spirituel. Non, malheureusement, pour animer le conflit, pour avoir haine. Quand vous entendez un imam ou un cheikh ou un conférencier, il commence à dire que les juifs, ce sont qui? Ce sont al-Yahoud, Ikhwan al-Qirada wal Khanazir. Les juifs, ce sont qui? Les frères des porcs et des singes. Comment il y aura les conséquences au niveau des enfants?
Okay, it's been a bit long, but I'll try anyway. So good evening. I'd like to talk about 4 areas where we need to find solutions and start a reflection process. The first is about religious education. The second is about education in general, then internet and also social media, and the political level and also the social dimension. So at first, let me talk about the religious education. Now, you know that there are a lot of Muslim organizations in our country, like the UOIF or the CPBS or the CCIF or the AMF, and what they're trying to do is not to disseminate spiritual ideas, but they are trying to conjure up conflict, hatred. They are preaching against Jews, they're preaching against Christians, they are referring to them as pigs or as monkeys. So we need to fight against political Islam.
Et l'autre côté que je pense que très important, on a créé la conférence des imams de France, il y a 80 imams. 2012, il y avait 100 imams devant le mémorial de la Shoah. On avait été une vingtaine d'imams, on était en Israël, on était à Yad Vashem, on a été à Ramallah, on était aussi devant le mur, on était à la mosquée d'Al-Aqsa, on était aussi à la Kanisat al-Qiyama. C'était un moment fort. Nous, on a pensé voir le président Mahmoud Abbas, c'était à Ramallah, avec Salam Fayyad. En Israël, on était avec le président Pérez, paix à son âme. Mais vous savez, à ce moment-là, quand on était en Israël, on a pensé, c'est ça y est, c'est la paix. Il y avait 20 imams, ensemble, avec la communauté juive, avec la communauté palestinienne. Mais vous savez, dès qu'on a retourné en France, on a eu quoi? Des manifestations à l'aéroport contre nous, contre les vendus, contre les traîtres. Nous, on a posé des questions. On a dit, mais les Palestiniens, ils sont où? Ils sont en France ou ils sont à Ramallah? C'est ça la vraie. Dans ce cas-là, c'était un travail long terme. On a développé aussi, chaque Ramadan, les temps d'Abraham. Le temps d'Abraham, c'est chaque Ramadan, il y a une rupture du jeûne, iftar, qui mange juifs, chrétiens, musulmans, sont ensemble. On le développe. J'ai eu l'honneur, dans le travail au sein de l'islam, de ramener Mr. Loder au Bahreïn, en Tunisie. L'année dernière, j'étais avec le mufti de la Tunisie, on était à la Griba. On essaie d'avancer dans ce sens-là, mais je ne vous cache pas, le chemin n'est pas facile. Il est long, il est très difficile, parce que quand même, face à ça, il y a un travail énorme à faire au sein de l'islam et au sein de la communauté musulmane.
So we have set up a confederation of 80 Imams in our country, and there were 12 of us who attended the festivities commemorating the Shoah, and we went to Yad Vashem, we went to the Wailing Wall, we went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and we went to see Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, we went to see President Peres, and while we were in Israel, everything was like very peaceful, and we had this feeling of belonging together. But as soon as we returned to France, there were major demonstrations at the airport, and we were considered as traitors. So we think this is a very long-term approach that requires a different approach. We also, for example, took Ron Lauder to Tunisia, to Bahrain. We had really we have a long way ahead of us, and we're trying to move forward, but this will definitely be a long way ahead of us.
Le deuxième point, c'est l'éducation. Vous savez l'importance de l'éducation. Vous avez l'exemple de Abdelkader Mera. Abdelkader Mera, il a témoigné que Mohamed Mera, c'est l'assassin de Toulouse. Abdelkader Mera, il a témoigné que sa mère, il l'a éduqué d'une manière, la haine des Juifs, la haine depuis l'enfance. Un enfant, le pauvre, il paye, il se remplit la facture de cette haine. Je pense que l'éducation, quand on éduque votre fils, que les juifs et les chrétiens ne vont pas aller au paradis, ça c'est un vrai problème. Que 1 milliard des musulmans ils vont au paradis, et 6 milliards ils vont aller à l'enfer, braise de l'enfer, ça c'est un vrai problème. Ça c'est le problème d'éducation au sein de la famille. Vous savez que même au sein de l'école, pour moi la loi de 2004, pour interdire les signes religieux, c'est un signe que des fois le gouvernement il est incapable de protéger les juifs dans les écoles publiques. Dans ce cas-là, ça c'est un travail énorme. De l'autre côté, on a ramené des jeunes de Molenbeek, des jeunes où il y avait les assassins de 13 novembre, les attentats de Bataclan. On l'a ramené à Paris. Ils étaient au mémorial de la Shoah. On a ramené à Drancy. Les jeunes, ils n'ont pas la même vision. Il y avait un témoignage d'un rescapé. Là, à ce moment, j'ai senti que l'importance de l'éducation, c'est le fruit qui peut protéger des générations.
So the next area is the area of education. Now, there's the story of Abdelkader Mera, the assassin of Toulouse, and his mother actually taught him to hate Jews. They are teaching the young children that, Jews, Christians, they don't go to paradise, they go to hell. And then there's the story with religious symbols, that they said that he can't protect young Jewish students if they are wearing their religious symbols overtly. And so it was forbidden to wear them. And then there's Molenbeek, there's 13th of November, there's Bataclan. So we brought a lot of young people to Drancy, and we tried to work at the level of education to try to eliminate those prejudices that exist at that level.
Le réseau social, il est Internet. Malheureusement, M. Google il est plus fort que l'imam CHALGHOUMI. Google, c'est triste, 2600 sites Internet francophones islamistes. 43 000 tweets par jour. Ça, c'est un chiffre énorme. La masse de la propagande, elle est forte. Que le juif, Vous savez, dernièrement, vous avez vu des vidéos, des massacres il y a eu en Syrie, et derrière moi, il était habillé, on dirait Israël, en train de massacrer les Palestiniens. Mais ça part dans les réseaux sociaux, chez la jeunesse. Je pense que, à part les réseaux sociaux, vous avez une chaîne, elle est connue, cette chaîne, elle s'appelle Al Jazeera. C'est une chaîne de haine, une chaîne forte. Elle rentre dans tous les foyers, elle paye les conséquences énormes, elle remplit une haine chez ça. Ça aussi, c'est une responsabilité. Chrétiens d'Orient sont massacrés, les Yazidis sont massacrés. Je pense que ces patrons, je vous donne un exemple. Vous avez ma page Facebook Imam Hassen CHALGHOUMI. Vous allez entrer dans la page, j'ai laissé les commentaires. J'ai des milliers de commentaires antisémites, CHALGHOUMI, sionistes, chien des juifs, chien tout ça. Et vous allez voir autant de haine qu'elle existe. Ça, j'ai entendu le matin, l'Union européenne, mais il n'y a rien. Il y a 10% qui était fait, 80%, non. On est loin encore. On est loin de qu'est-ce qui se passe dans l'Internet, dans les réseaux sociaux.
And there's internet and there's social networks. On Google, you can find 2,600 French-speaking Islamic sites that are fundamentalist sites. Then there's 43,000 anti-Semitic tweets a day. Then there's videos, you see videos of Syrian massacres, for example. Then there's Al Jazeera, that is a network that is spreading hate. And there's lots of massacres shown all over television. And if you just check out my Facebook page, there are thousands of anti-Semitic comments there. So it's a long way that still lies ahead of us.
Je termine. Je pense que aussi la politique, ils sont responsables. Vous avez, chez nous, malheureusement, il y a certains partis politiques qui essaient de récupérer le conflit israélo-palestinien. Il y a des partis politiques pour des fins électorales, pour des fins seulement clientisme, chercher les voix des musulmans. Et ça, c'est une haine, c'est une honte. Au lieu d'avoir un homme politique, quel que soit de droite ou de gauche, il a une vision de réunir ses fidèles, de réunir ses citoyens. Vous voulez soutenir les Palestiniens ou les Israéliens, vous leur ramenez la paix. Ce n'est pas le contraire. Et je pense que ces partis politiques, extrême gauche, communistes, qui utilisent la misère des musulmans, les misères du quartier à des fins politiques, on le paye cher. On le paye avec des conséquences très très graves. Et ça, je pense que c'est une responsabilité. Nous, la société civile, il faut qu'elle s'engage. Parce que nous sommes, je termine avec ça, un proverbe, c'est un bateau. Ce bateau, il y a deux personnes. Il y en a qui sont en bas, il y en a qui sont en haut. Et vous savez, celle d'en bas, ils veulent chercher de l'eau, ils ne veulent pas déranger les gens qui sont en haut. Dans ce cas-là, il faut un trou en bas. S'ils le laissent, ils vont coller tous. S'ils l'empêchent, ils vont sauver tous. Je pense que si la société civile, tout le monde, associative, citoyen, écrivain, quel que soit, réagit pas, malheureusement, l'Europe risque, face à cette haine, face à la montée de l'islamisme et de l'extrême droite, des dégâts énormes comme on le connaît avant un siècle. Merci.
Can you hear me? Okay. Finally, there's the level of political responsibility. A lot of politicians are quite irresponsible, and they're abusing and instrumentalizing the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. And they're trying to abuse it for their own purposes, and that's actually a shame. So we need politicians with a real vision who are ready to reconcile the different communities and not use the conflicts in order to foster their own ideas. Now, this political abuse and instrumentalization must stop. Let me give you an allegory. This is like a boat. There are two levels in the boat, and there's the one at the top and the ones at the bottom. And the ones at the bottom, all they want to get is water. And if the water is above and they can't get water from above, they're going to get it from below. So the boat will sink if they're not going to get the water from above. So we're in this boat together. We need to, try to work together in order to come up with a common vision and not work against each other. So we need responsible politicians who are ready to react. Otherwise, there will be an enormous price to pay.
And at this point, Rabbi Abraham SKORKA.
Good evening for all of you. Thank you so much for inviting me to share this important event. The first thoughts and sentiments that came into my mind and heart when I had received the proposed theme for this panel was about the terrible silence which accompanies us Jews throughout the greater part of our history, both heavenly silence and human silence. Jews have had many opportunities to understand, since the very beginning of their existence, the meaning of suffering, such as they experienced during the slavery in Egypt. They questioned God about the suffering of the people and especially about the unjust suffering of the righteous. Jeremiah in chapter 12, 1-5, posed the question and received an answer similar to the one God gave to Job. Who are you, O mortal, that I should reveal my secrets to you? When the Talmudic sages asked desperately why their colleagues were being tortured to death by Hadrian's legionaries, the answer they received from God, from heaven, was keep silent. These were my initial reflections about the theme of this panel. In 1944, when the dimensions of the Shoah began to be known among Jews living outside of Europe, Yehuda Leib Magnes, the then president of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, in the opening address of its 20th academic year, quoted Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev's dramatic question, I do not ask, Lord of the world, to know why I suffer, but only this, do I suffer for thy sake? André Neher investigated this issue for years and wrote a masterpiece, The Exile of the Word, from the silence of the Bible to the silence of Auschwitz. However, it is not the silence of God toward Jewish suffering that we come to analyze today, but the human silence and indifference towards the plight of their Jewish brothers and sisters. My father used to be a great reader of Yiddish literature, and from time to time he read and shared with me things that made an impact on him, even though I was then just a little boy. The books he read were published in Argentina, and one of them was Die Welt hat geschwiegen, and the world was in silence by Elie Wiesel. A shortened French version of the book became his famous novella La Nuit, Night, when the Nobel Prize winner François Mauriac encouraged him to publish it. That was my first encounter with human silence regarding the saga of the Jews. A second pivotal experience for me of this silence I felt personally in the weeks before the Six-Day War in 1977. The impressive victory of the Israeli Defense Forces concealed the anguish and anxiety suffered by Jews in Israel and throughout the world. The Israel Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and even the old President, Shazar, were seen on television screens calling, begging for a peaceful solution. Jamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian president, declared constantly that his ultimate aim was to throw all the Jews living in Israel into the Mediterranean. Since today we know the outcome of his efforts, it is easily to forget the anguish felt then. But at the time, I asked myself, I asked God, are Hitler's survivors going to be annihilated? Will what Hitler did not finish be completed by Nasser and his allies? The United Nations was totally unable to resolve the crisis peacefully. The self-interest of the rival Cold War superpowers dictated the speeches of the representatives of the great powers. They played a political chess match at a safe distance while real people were preparing to fight and die in their proxy war. The Jews of Israel stood alone again in silence, as in Europe 27 years ago, earlier. Elie Wiesel masterfully bound these two anguishes and silences in the first paragraph in his book, A Beggar in Jerusalem. Silence and indifference in the face of anti-Semitic acts and words was and continues to be a great failing of many institutions at large and of religious organizations in particular. One of the strongest weapons that anti-Semites have in their hands is the indifference of the others. A careful reading of the history of the Shoah reveals that Hitler only determined his final solution of the Jews' problem, which means their total physical extermination, on January 13th, 1942, when the Wannsee Conference took place. This was years after the Shoah is usually considered to have begun on November 10th, 1938. Hitler came to this abominable resolution only after seeing the silence and apathy that his anti-Semitic policies had produced to that point. In addition, in some Christian denominations and in some language coming from the Islamic world, there still persists a theological anti-Semitism. One of the most sincere and meaningful self-criticisms on the subject can be found in Cardinal Walter Kasper's foreword for the book, Christ Jesus, and the Jewish People Today. And the quotation says, "The history of the Jewish-Christian relations is complex and difficult. In addition to some better times, as when bishops took Jews under their protection against pogroms by mobs, there were dark times that have been especially impressed upon the collective Jewish consciousness. The Shoah, the state-sponsored organized murder of approximately 6 million European Jews, based on primitive racial ideology, is the absolute low point in this history. The Holocaust cannot be attributed to Christianity as such, since it also had clear anti-Christian features. However, centuries-old Christian theological anti-Judaism contributed as well, encouraging a widespread antipathy for Jews, so that ideologically and racially motivated anti-Semitism could prevail in this terrible way, and resistance against the outrageous inhuman brutality did not achieve the breadth and clarity that one should have expected. Unfortunately, it required the unprecedented crime of the Shoah for a fundamental rethinking to come about." End of the quotation. In our present reality, anti-Semitism is one of a large number of fanatical, violent expressions that hurts humanity. In his visit to Al-Azhar University in Egypt, Pope Francis and Professor Ahmed El-Tayeb, Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, condemned in the strongest terms all those who kill and teach hate in the name of God. When such abhorrent things occur, the voices of all the religious leaders are not as loud and clear as they must be. Universal and unified verbal religious condemnation is a powerful force against anti-Semitism and all kinds of racism. Instead, cynical comments and attitudes are very often what appear in the world media. Human blood has the same color and characteristics for everyone. It doesn't matter if it is Jewish blood, Christian blood, or Muslim blood. When one person is killed by the madness of bigotry, humankind has to be in mourning. Anti-Semitism is a very difficult phenomenon to understand. Jean-Paul Sartre, Hannah Arendt, and many other brilliant minds devoted their best intellectual powers to uncover its roots and motivations. In our day, anti-Semitism also can be expressed as an anti-Zionism that decides to see the end of the existence of the State of Israel. Zionism is rooted in the 2,000 years hope of the Jewish people to returning to the land of Israel. Isaiah's and Ezekiel's prophecies were not understood by many Jews throughout the generations as merely a fantasy or a metaphor, but as a reality that could come into being. Jews prayed and continue praying each day for the reunification of their people in Zion and the return of God's presence to it. The land and today the state of Israel is a defining aspect of Jewish spiritual identity. Hasidim and Mitnagdim, the two great Jewish religious movements in the 17th century, organized aliyot, the establishments of members of their communities in different cities of what was the then province of the Turkish Empire. After the last decades of the 19th century, Jews that looked for a new style of Judaism with religious values expressed in different ways came to the land and transformed swamps into oases. Hebrew was transformed into a living language, and many other cultural aspects of Judaism were revitalized. When David Ben-Gurion visited Argentina in 1969, he delivered a message to the Jewish community in Buenos Aires. He summarized the history of the achievements of the Zionist movement and concluded by rephrasing the verse of Psalms 29:11, which says, "The Lord will give strength to his people, the Lord will bless his people with peace." Into, the Lord gave strength to his people, the Lord will bless his people with peace. Most of the dreams of the Zionists became a reality in a democratic modern state, living in peace with his neighbors. The greatest contribution that the various religions can offer to Jews nowadays is to proclaim messages and spread attitudes of peace that lead to the solution of the Israeli-Palestinian controversy. To express clearly in all possible ways through every type of media that terror is not the way, that war is not a solution. They must insist that the life and future of each Israeli and Palestinian youngster, whether Jew, Christian, or Muslim, must be everyone's primary concern, and that dialogue is the only tool to pave the way to this future. Jewish history, as conveyed by Jewish liturgy, recalls that each generation has a known poisonous leader who tried to eliminate the Jewish people. Pharaoh, Amalek, Haman from Susa, Titus, Hadrian, inquisitors, pogroms, etc., etc. In the words of the traditional Haggadah narrative that Jews recite during the Passover dinner, I quote, "For not just one person alone has risen against us to destroy us, but in every generation they rise against us to destroy us, and the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hands." It is a challenge for all of us, and especially for religious leaders, to make in our generation a turning point in history, to change inherited hatred into friendship. This will enable us to realize that dream of human unity that all religions have sought since they first discovered the presence of God in the midst of human reality. Thank you so much.
We'll now move on to the musical interlude provided by Cantor Shmuel Barzilai, accompanied by Eli Meiri. Cantor Barzilai was born in Jerusalem into a family of renowned cantors. He studied in Israeli yeshivot, received his basic education from the Viennese cantor Zalman Polak. He graduated from the Institute of Music and Cantorial Singing in Tel Aviv, majored in philosophy and Judaic studies at the University of Vienna, where he received his master's degree. From 1992, he has served as chief cantor of the Viennese Jewish community. He has sung the traditional memorial prayers at various Holocaust memorials. He, in 2017, was awarded the Golden Badge of Honor for services rendered to the Republic of Austria He's recorded many CDs, including the compositions of the world-famous cantor Solomon Zulzer, who was actually his predecessor, I think, in the similar role in Vienna. And he recorded that with the Vienna Boys Choir. His profound musical and religious knowledge is best demonstrated in his book, Hasidic Ecstasy in Music, published in 2007. And the final thing that I'll say is that in the Hymnody prayer, which the cantor offers on the High Holy Days, they describe what the ideal cantor is, umorav bedati mabriot, which literally means that he's sort of mixed in terms of personality with people, that he's a person who loves to be with people and people love to be with. Cantor Barzilai will be performing for us first. Habeit Mishamayim be performing in Yiddish in a version by Guzinsko. Cantor.
Thank you. הבית משמיים, הבית משמיים, משמיים הוא ראה. כי אין לו לגבוקלס בגויים, בגויים. נחשבנו קצוי לטבח יובל להרוג ולאבד ולמכול חרפה. הבית משמיים וראה Hoe karop von Himmel und sei, deine Kinder schlagt man, deine Kinder plagt man macht a Telefone sei. Nimm fahr sehr Rache geschwind, fahr die Blut von dein Ohr, meine Kind. Du sie überzeugen, hast du gesehen, wenn ich schweigen, habet mich schon mal im Ure. Seit ist geboren, die jüdische Emune, sein wenn wir immer in Gefahr und Sakone. Seit Gott hat gegeben, die Jiden, die Teure, seien mir immer in Schreck und mit dem Meure. Wir schrecken sich vor jeden, was will uns tun weh. Habet mich בית משמיים וראה קוקרop von Himmel und sei deine Kinder schlagt man, deine Kinder plagt man macht a Telefone sei. Nimm fahr sie Rache geschwind, fahr die Blut von dein Ohr, mein Kind. Du sie überzeugen, hast du gesehen, wenn ich schweigen, habet mich schon mal im Ohr. Gott, ob schon Rachmones, schon zu viel Korbones haben dir gegeben, deine Kinder. Vergib die Chatoim, mek ois die Peshoim. Zeig uns wieder deine Wunder, sich zu uns גישרי הבית משמיים הבית משמיים וראה ku karop von ihm ohne sei deine Kinder schlockt deine Kinder flockt man macht hat Telefone sei nimm Farse Rache geschwind fahr die Blut von dein Ohren Kind du sie überzeugen hast du wir sie mir nicht schweigen habet mich schon mal im Nimm Farse Rache geschwind fahr die Blut von dein arme Kind tu sie überzeugen hast du sie mir nicht schweigen habet mich am im
Thank you, Cantor BÜNKER. For those of us who love to listen to him, we're going to ask him to come back for another song after our round here. We want to try to keep somehow close to our schedule, but I want to pose to our panel members now one of the few questions that we included, which I think has not been really addressed by them. Each one, if they would like, a few minutes, but really like 4 or 5 at the most, to respond to this question. Then we'll hear another song from Cantor BÜNKER and have some questions for the floor and try to draw it to a close, somewhat close, not too many minutes after our scheduled time. And this is a question that has come up over and over in our sessions, especially those ancient people like me in the sessions that we've been having. So I want to address it directly. It's the question which was phrased on this list as follows. Do you feel that religious teachings and ideas are in any way encouraging anti-Semitism? And more specifically, do you think that your or our foundational scriptures contribute or contributed either themselves or in the way they are received to hatred of Jews? And to make sure that we're clear here, what we're asking really is whether or not some of those traditions and beliefs that we honor in the seminal texts are not part of the problem that we are facing. So I'll ask our panel to just go, if you don't mind, in the order from the side over here with Archbishop PIZZABALLA and on from there.
Very shortly, if the religious teaching, if I understood well the question, if our religious teaching is a source of anti-Semitism and so on, in the past for sure yes, today partially still yes, partially. As I said, at least different churches, for my church, we are in process of changes, purification. This is endless because it takes long time, as I said. But of course, still there are, I heard some panels today that some prejudices that are still present, Old Testament, New Testament, Pharisee mean Jews, and Jesus is the alternatives, and so on. So there are still some elements that are we need still to purify, because can create a basis for some fundamentalism. Concerning the scriptures, you have to put the scripture in the context. And the problem are not the scriptures, but the interpretation of the scripture. How, we cannot interpret it literally. You have to understand the context, the historical context, the literature context, and so on. And in the past it was not the way, but now I think at least this is clear, evident for us that the interpretation should be put in the context, and the interpretation of the scriptures is not, I think, not anymore, at least in our official teaching, the source of the anti-Semitism or prejudices and so on, at least.
Rabbi SKORKA?
Yes, regarding our sources, of course, that it's impossible to find anti-Semitism in Talmud and Tanakh and in the literature of the responsa. But what can add to this theme is this. We have very controversial aspects in rabbinic sources in Talmud, even in Tanakh, and all depends, as it was said, regarding the interpretation. And the other face of anti-Semitism, the other side, is our approaching to the others. And this is a theme that we have worked a lot about it. Again, we need a reinterpretation of many of our sources, but we can find in our sources a lot of very, very positive opinions about how to work in an open, really, let's say, democratic, humanistic, and pluralistic society. And we have to take these sources and to emphasize that.
So thank you for the question. It shows for me our difference, or my difference. On the one hand, we are supposed as religious leaders to have something in common in the sense of Abrahamitic religions. And on the other hand, the question is really a question for Christians and Muslims. And our situation is quite different. Adolf Eichmann was a good Protestant from Linz in Upper Austria. And this we have to keep in mind if we look for what can we do together. So, but let me come to your question. Yes, and I think the problem is that, let me say it with a question to you, Archbishop, that we can, I'm not quite sure if we can make a difference between an original sense of text and the interpretation, because the New Testament is in itself interpretation. It's a translation into Greek, and if you think, how do you translate the word telos of the law? If Paul uses this word, does this mean the end? Does this mean the disinheritance of Judaism? Or does it mean that he understands telos in the sense of fulfilling, of a new broadening, widening? We say it, but the translation is already a kind of interpretation. And it's very difficult to go behind the curtain in interpreting the Holy Scriptures. And so I would say it's a decision how we want to understand it. It's a decision. We need to decide. And I think in the Protestant tradition, this is the sola scriptura principle. You have to decide, and you have to decide in responsibility. What is your interpretation in the perspective? In the perspective you read in the whole Bible.
And this cannot be hatred, this cannot be hostility, this has to be reconciliation, this has to be all what we understand in the kingdom of God.
Before we go on, we are offering a 30-second rebuttal.
It's very interesting. 30 saying, I hate you. 30
Oh,
saying,
hate it, whatever it is.
Okay. Very interesting. No, I agree, of course. I think the interpretation is not given once forever. Now interpret, understand Jesus after 2,000 years much better, I think, than 500 years ago and so on. So the times and the situation, the history help us to understand and to interpret better. But I think it is clear now that our attitude now is more free than as it was in the past. And so I agree with you anyway, but it doesn't give me enough time to, but I agree with you, but I want to say that the interpretation, of course, it is an interpretation, we have to take the responsibility of the interpretation, but now we are in a context that at least the churches, Protestant and Catholic churches at least, where our interpretation can be much more free than in the past.
Thank you for the response within our time frame here. And now we go to Imam CHALGHOUMI to address this question.
Vous savez, si on dit non, ça veut dire c'est de mensonge. Ça, c'est une vérité. Sinon, vous ne trouvez jamais le Mufti Hussein de Jérusalem, il est avec Hitler. Je pense que il y a des certains passages dans le Coran sont durs, comme Khaybar. Vous travaillez à Barbès, maintenant ils traînent, ils commencent à dire Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahoud, Jayshu Muhammad, Sayaoud. Il y a des versets qui sont très durs. Et c'est le moment que les savants de l'islam, quel que soit de l'Azhar ou d'autres, qui font des vraies lectures, un vrai sens d'interprétation. Et ça, c'est très important. Ça, je trouve que c'est là qu'on paye un peu des dégâts d'un travail énorme. Certains, ils disent que ce sont le peuple maudit par Dieu, le peuple qui a assassiné les prophètes. Quand vous enseignez à un enfant ça, on paye les dégâts après. Et je pense que ça, c'est un travail important au sein de l'islam, au sein des musulmans, au sein de la lecture, pour clarifier ça et de l'interpréter, que c'est historiquement, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé, pour éviter toutes ces lectures catastrophiques.
So if we were to say no, or if we were to answer no to this question, there would be a lie, a blatant lie. So there are certain passages in the Quran, Khaybar, that, certain verses that are quite hard to take and to stomach. And I believe that we must have a truthful interpretation of these verses of the Quran. I mean, if we keep telling our children that these are terrible people who killed a prophet and who are going to be forever damned, so I think that would be the wrong approach to take.
Now we're going to ask the cantor to come back. And I can't resist just a comment about what he sang before, Habeit Mishamayim, which asked God to look from heaven really on the suffering of his people. And now Mihaish, who is the person who seeks life, from Psalm 34, 13 to 14, which teaches us the lesson that it's the person who speaks well of others and seeks peace. Cantor.
Beim Klavier Eli Meiri. החפץ חיים אוהב ימים ושפתיך מדבר מימיו סומרה ועשה טוב בקש שלום ורודפהו נצא לשונך מרע ושפתיך מדבר מימיו סומרה ועשה טוב בקש שלום ורודפהו חפץ חיים אוהב ימים לראות טוב נצא לשונך מרע ושפתיך מדבר מימיו ועשה טוב בקש שלום ורודפהו נצא לשונך מרע ושפתיך מדבר מימיו סומרה ועשה טוב בקש שלום ורודפהו
Thank you again, Cantor Barzilai and Eli Meiri, our accompanist. Now, what I'd like to do now is take one question directed to each panelist from the audience. I think that would be a good time compromise and work out well. So I'm going to ask in order for question for each person. And if you raise your hand if you have a question, then that will be, I think, the best way to do this. Our panelists are here with us. You'll have a chance to talk to them during the course of our program anyhow. So let me begin with a question for Archbishop PIZZABALLA. Do we have a question for Archbishop PIZZABALLA? Yes, please. Give him a second to get you the microphone.
I'm Sergio Della Pergola of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. My question can go to any of the panelists. The question is this: has any of your churches ever acted what in Hebrew we have the action of cherem, which is boycott, which is banishing from the community against someone who has done an act which is overtly anti-Semitic? Is banishment, that is quite a strong sanction against such a person, ever enacted? Thank you.
Yep, it's a question for you.
Sincerely, I don't remember. I remember a kind, but he was not very Catholic. He was the ultra-Catholics, I think, from this Lefebvre, Sisma, Schneider. I don't remember, to be sincere, any official Catholic that receive as communica. There is communication for this. Punishment, yes, some punishment, order of silence, all these things. But excommunication, I don't remember. Technically, maybe yes, but I don't remember. I am not aware of this.
Thank you. A question for Rabbi SKORKA. Dina, in Spanish? Argentinian Spanish?
¿Cómo no?
Yiddish?
Soon it will be Pesach, okay? It will be Pesach and we'll be sitting around the Seder table. I have, me and my husband, 10 grandchildren. When we read the Haggadah, and we come to this שפוך חמתך לגויים אשר לא ידעוך, okay? It reminds me, first of all, it's quite an uneasy feeling to read it to your children. שפוך חמתך לגויים אשר לא ידעוך, pour your wrath, it's God, please pour your wrath, your anger on the non-Jews who didn't recognize you. That's a very harsh wish, שפוך חמתך. In the Good Friday prayer, in which Jews for centuries were depicted as perfidy, traitors, this prayer was changed by the Catholic Church and the perfidy was taken off. Would you recommend that we take off the Haggadah, this שפוך חמתך לגויים? We offer Imam CHALGHOUMI to take off the apes and the pigs from the Quran, and we'll proceed somewhere.
My answer is this, my dear Dina. It's a question of interpretation. Who are the goyim? It's a matter of interpretation. I will tell you, no, it's not. It's more than a joke. It's more than a joke. If you analyze how the Talmud and afterwards in the codification of Maimonides approach the theme of the extermination of Amalek, the answer is, if Amalek makes teshuvah, Amalek, you know who was Amalek, the first enemy of that tried to kill the son of Israel when they went from Egypt and paved their way to liberty. Is the commandment is not, as it appears in the Bible, to destroy totally Amalek, all the time that Amalek continues being Amalek. What is paganism? What is to be a pagan? In accordance to my understood, I will give you just an example. A pagan is Hitler, was Hitler. A pagan was Mussolini. A pagan is each leader or each culture that the idea of the culture is to destroy, to kill, to murder. Those are the goyim asher lo yedaucha. Those are the goyim, the people that are knowing God. To know God means to respect the other. This is my interpretation. If you would like to erase that from the Haggadah, okay, erase that. But give me a chance to find another interpretation. To ask God, please, in some way erase, but in accordance to, give me just 30 seconds more. In accordance, there is a story in the Talmud about Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir lived in a neighborhood in which were all kind of gangs, bad boys that troubled him, bothered him all the time. Is at certain opportunity his wife, Rabbi Meir's wife, Beruria, she was a very clever woman, she saw how Rabbi Meir put a talit over his head and is praying. And she said, what are you doing? Are you praying for the death of these bad boys, of these gangs? It appears in the Psalm Barchi Nafshi 104 that appears that at the end of the psalm appears, and it's not going to be no more choteim. Choteim means transgressors. It's going to be in the future, God help us to build a reality in which there is no more transgressors, but there is no more transgressions. In this sense, I agree with you. To erase.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like a question for Bishop BÜNKER. Yes. Karen.
Another question about interpretation. You said it's a matter of interpretation, the anti-Semitic, how to deal with the texts in an anti-Semitic way or not, and you referred to telos in Romans 10. This is true. We can discuss what the meaning, what the exact meaning of telos is indeed. However, you have in the New Testament a lot of stereotypes about an interpretation is not possible. They are just there. The killing of Jesus, the Jews as the children of a devil, the hatred, the Jews as enemies of God, etc., etc., etc. We have so much explicit anti-Semitic statements in the New Testament. This you can't whitewash. What do you do about those texts?
Yes, I agree. Of course, we have these texts, if they are correctly called anti-Semitic, not in every case. I think we could look on every point in the New Testament. I would not erase them. I think they are part of our history, and they are part of sometimes they are also part of an inner Jewish conflict, because not every example is in the time where we use already the term Christians. So I think I was impressed of your interpretation of this point in the Pesach Haggadah. I think we should not erase the dark sides in our traditions, because they are maybe they are a warning. They show that, and now I say it for Protestantism or Christianity, maybe if I'm allowed, Archbishop. Religions can be both. I say it from the Christian point of view. They can promote violence and hatred, and they can promote reconciliation and peace. And what they do with us and in our times is up to us. And so we read also the New Testament not in a literally biblical fundamentalistic sense, but in a critic sense. And this is necessary. And one point to find the criterions are the relationships to Judaism today.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like a question for Imam CHALGHOUMI. And after he gives his answer, you'll please give me 2 minutes to thank everyone before you get up to leave.
Thank you. So, of course, Imam CHALGHOUMI, your efforts and the efforts of your colleagues are your efforts and the efforts of your colleagues are worthy of admiration. Your personal courage and persistence. Yes. But it somehow seems that it doesn't work according to what you have depicted, the situation in your country, in France, and what we heard yesterday for another Frenchman from Bernard-Henri Lévy. And I think one of the motives of this conference is the feeling that France is leading in Muslim anti-Semitism, and the subjective feelings of the Jews of France that they cannot, some of them at least, that they cannot portray their future there anymore. So my simple question is, in the spirit of this conference, what do you think should be done? For example, should the French government outlaw all these long list of organizations that you characterize that having no spiritual aims but only political aims? Do you support outlawing the Muslim Brothers, for example? So I know it's very difficult, but at least some changes in the way we tackle the problem seem to be necessary now. And may I have one word for Dina? Do you know the continuation of this verse? It speaks about the Goyim, the Gentiles, that ate Jacob and destroyed his abode. So I don't justify it in these terms, but it's not a total hatred towards the Gentiles.
Oui, malheureusement, je pense qu'il y a deux côtés. Il y a un côté, il faut répression et valoriser. C'est très important. Le gouvernement aujourd'hui, le président Macron, il parle de l'islam. Maintenant, on a un chantier, un travail énorme au sein de l'islam pour avoir un islam de France ou un islam d'Europe. Il n'existe pas. Je pense qu'on attend du président Macron et de l'Europe d'avoir une fermeté face à l'islam politique réel. Hein. On n'a plus le stade de discours. Mira, Kouachi, Koulibaly, 17 morts presque, entre les crimes de Mira jusqu'à les crimes de Kouachi avec Medina Mouch et d'autres. Il faut une vraie sanction et en même temps valoriser l'islam spirituel, un islam de mi-vivre ensemble. Il faut donner les moyens parce que vous savez, on rame seul des fois. On essaie d'avancer, mais il n'est pas facile. Je pense que le gouvernement, quel que soit de Macron, si elle ne réussit pas, il y a un risque énorme. Et l'avenir des Juifs de France, il est en France. Moi, je le crois. Mon avenir, il est en France. L'avenir aussi des Européens en Europe. S'il y a des problèmes, on baisse les bras et on va partir, je ne pense pas, ce n'est pas la solution. La solution, il faut résister, malgré les menaces, malgré les problèmes, mais en même temps, il faut que tous s'engagent.
Yep.
Let it translate to the audience what the Imam said. Was that?
Si les Juifs y partent, pour moi, tout le monde y part. Je vous rends hommage à vous. Pourquoi? C'est qui a créé l'ECRA, SOS Racisme? C'est pas la communauté juive, les élites, contre par rapport à ce qu'ils ont subi la Shoah. Ça, c'est la communauté musulmane, elle ne le comprend pas. Les premières victimes qui vont le payer très cher, c'est cette communauté musulmane. Mais malheureusement, la gangrène de l'islamisme, elle empêche que ce message y passe.
So we need to have two approaches, a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, there must be repression, there must be real sanctions against any abuse or instrumentalization of political Islam. And on the other hand, we also must try to point out the positive sides and try to have a vision for an improvement. Now, President Macron, he talked about the Islam of France or the Islam of Europe even. We don't have that now. We need to build it. And we must be very firm against political Islam and really sanction it. If Macron fails, this is a big risk. So we can't just simply stand by and let things happen. We must resist.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to extend our thanks to our distinguished panelists, to Cantor Barzilai and the accompanist, to the tech staff that seems to have done very well for us this evening, for all of you for joining us. Thank you and good night.